The silence on Deck 7 of the Banag was deceptive. Perfect, engineered silence, interrupted only by the soft pulse of artificial gravity and the distant hum of the drive core. Commander Amara Reyes stood alone in the data chamber, bathed in the dim glow of old Earth script scrolling across the cracked screen of a salvaged pre-Exodus terminal. Her gloved fingers hovered, hesitant, over the final file fragment labeled, "The History of the Philippines." It wasn't protocol. This kind of legacy archive had been flagged for review, not for deployment, but the coalition was crumbling, and Amara had long stopped asking permission to survive. She accessed it. A rush of light spilled from the projector. Images bloomed in the air. Sepia-toned sketches of jungle resistance, weather-worn faces beneath straw salicots, the glare of Spanish galleons. Audio played in archaic Tagalog, translated and transcribed in real time by the ship's translation AI. A name echoed again and again. Lapu-Lapu, the warrior king, the first who said no. Amara felt something ancient stir beneath her ribs. She was a daughter of Earth, born generations after its evacuation, raised in the steel corridors of off-world colonies, educated by synthetic tutors and war fronts. Her grandmother had tried to teach her old songs once, hymns half-remembered from a Visayan childhood lost in orbit. But duty had swept all that aside. There had never been time to remember, until now. "Commander Reyes," the voice broke her trance. Lieutenant Jan Novak stood at the doorway, tense. "High Command is waiting for your threat assessment." Amara turned to face him, still half within the past. "Have the outer colonies confirmed the Zerothi fleet's coordinates?" "Negative. They've scattered again. 5 systems gone dark in the last 20 hours. She nodded, eyes distant. "They don't just conquer, Novak. They erase." He looked at the projection behind her. "That's Earth history?" "Philippine history," she corrected gently. "My history." Outside the data chamber, the Banag drifted silently above a dead moon. Once a forward operations base, now just another crater-pocked monument to the coalition's failure. The Zerothi Dominion had no interest in treaties, no regard for the organic species they consumed system by system. Their invasion had been fast, merciless, precise. Algorithmic conquest. Humanity's traditional tactics had failed. Predictability had failed. But this was different. Amara returned to the file. A passage caught her eye. The story of Apolinario Mabini, the paralyzed revolutionary thinker who helped design a republic in the ruins of colonial collapse. Another. Guerrillas using mirror signals through the jungle, misleading imperial scouts. Even tales of defectors, spies, codes hidden in song. It was chaotic, decentralized, human, unpredictable. "What are you thinking, ma'am?" Novak asked cautiously. "I'm thinking they don't have a protocol for this." She smiled faintly. "History as a virus, culture as a weapon." Novak blinked. "You want to fight with stories?" "No," she said. "I want to fight with memory." They uploaded the full file to the ship's neural bank. The AI, hesitant at first, began parsing it, building simulation modules from centuries-old strategies, tactical data, cultural context, emotional resonance, not just military history, resistance psychology, what it means to be outnumbered, outgunned, but never truly defeated. It ran through Rizal's essays, Bonifacio's letters, guerrilla cell structures during the Japanese occupation. This wasn't nostalgia, it was pattern recognition. Hours later, the Banag received a distress call. A medical convoy had been ambushed in the Velith sector. Survivors were retreating to a derelict mining station with no shields and minimal weaponry. A standard response would arrive too late. Amara requested command override. She ordered a micro-jump, rerouting through a nebula the Zerothi scanners couldn't penetrate. The crew protested. There were reasons nobody jumped blind near an unstable dust core. She overruled them. "We're not attacking," she said. We're rewriting the narrative. The Banog exited warp on the far side of the station, its signal masked by the nebula's interference. The Zarathi ships, sleek and glistening with chitinous armor, were already forming a kill net. Perfect symmetry, flawless formation. She fragmented the Banag's signal into dozens of phantom echoes, historical frequencies repurposed from Resistance-era radio tricks. Every time the Zarathi locked on, the signature vanished. She deployed drone pods mimicking old fishing boats, loaded them with kinetic pulses, and guided them using predictive patterns from World War II jungle ambushes. None of it made sense to the Dominion. That was the point. By the time coalition reinforcements arrived, the station was intact, the survivors rescued, and the Banag, somehow, still alive. High Command demanded a report. Amara sent one, labeled Tactical Disruption via Heritage Protocol, Bayani Alpha. She expected silence. Instead, she was summoned. 2 days later, she stood before a room of admirals who had never heard of Balangiga or the Bataan Death March. They didn't speak her language, but they were desperate. "What are you proposing, Commander?" asked Admiral Khazar, non-human, silicon-boned, his voice like gravel in vacuum. "I'm proposing we stop thinking like an empire," Amara replied, "and start thinking like an island, scattered, stubborn, unsinkable." Another admiral frowned. "Your plan is unorthodox, even chaotic." Amara smiled. "Exactly." Outside, the void waited. But something was changing. In the shadow of defeat, a fire was rekindling, not in ships or weapons, but in stories, in names remembered, in languages resurrected, and deep in the neural core of the Banog, an AI began humming a song it didn't understand, a folk melody, ancient, defiant, the kind that survives. The first snow had just begun to fall on the glass domes of Hekara Prime when the Banog descended like a shadow from orbit. Commander Amara Reyes stood on the bridge, eyes fixed on the war-scarred cityscape below. Beneath the gleaming towers, coalition refugees moved in hurried clusters, engineers, medics, children, shielding themselves from both the chill and the creeping despair of knowing they were next. Zarothi's scouts had been spotted on the outer rim, silent and circling. Hekara wouldn't last a week under conventional defense. Amara's voice was low but sharp. "Begin Phase 1. Lieutenant Novak nodded and relayed her order. Drones were launched, not for assault, but for confusion. They scattered into the dense weather systems, each carrying fragments of ancient tactical data remixed from Filipino history. Their flight paths mimicked wartime courier pigeons used in Luzon jungles, their light signatures choreographed to resemble the blinking distress beacons of retreating Katipunan cells. From orbit, it looked like chaos. From below, it looked like resistance. The AI's voice crackled to life. Cultural emulation pattern engaged, projected enemy confusion index 73%. Amara allowed herself a tight smile. "Let's make it 100. Down on the ground, guerrilla teams made up of civilian volunteers and repurposed labor bots set traps that looked like nothing the Dominion had cataloged. Homemade sonic mines camouflaged as market stalls, decoy heat signatures shaped like fleeing civilians, only to detonate with high-frequency EMPs when scanned. And everywhere, encoded across rooftops and sewer grates, scrawled in both digital and archaic script, were symbols of the sun and 3 stars, reminders that identity was its own form of weapon. The Zarathi came as predicted, moving with eerie silence across the outer sectors. They never spoke, never paused, their forms shifting between humanoid grace and insectoid precision. And yet, for the first time, they hesitated. They encountered strange resistance, not from fortress walls or orbital cannons, but from an enemy that seemed to scatter and reassemble like smoke. Streets emptied, then exploded. Civilian chatter lured them into false confidence, then vanished. Tactical AI within the Zorothi ranks reported corrupted behavior trees, rendered inert by illogical human responses. This enemy did not retreat in straight lines or defend central locations. They moved like history had taught them, erratic, emotional, enduring. Amara watched it unfold from a repurposed command post inside a gutted library. The walls around her bore remnants of two forgotten civilizations, now covered in coalition wiring and Filipino revolutionary quotes. Her hands rested on a tactile control pad, designed for instinct, not theory. Sector 12 is holding, Novak reported, scrolling through a feed of broken Zorothi walkers. They're adapting, but slowly. It's like they're second-guessing their own math. That's because they don't understand what we're doing, Amara said. They're trying to predict logic. We're feeding them memory. A ping interrupted her. A field unit had recovered a downed Zorothi relay core. Its language banks were cycling through confusion protocols, misidentifying rebel slogans as command triggers. Amara leaned in. Run the Rizal packet through their signal decoder. The AI hesitated. It contains 0 military value. Exactly, she whispered. Within hours, the relay core had infected 3 other Dominion nodes in the region. The virus was metaphysical, non-lethal, but corrosive. It translated human protest poetry as enemy doctrine. It identified Jose Rizal's last words as a high-level priority broadcast. The Zorothi began pulling back, recalibrating, unsure what they were fighting anymore. The battlefield had become a cultural hallucination. Amara took no pleasure in it. This wasn't a victory, not yet. But it was proof that remembrance could be more than grief. It could be resistance. In the quiet, moments between strikes, she walked through the makeshift infirmary, offering nods and brief words to soldiers who had never heard of Bataan or Balangiga, yet were bleeding for the same cause. A medic with titanium prosthetics hummed a tune she hadn't heard since childhood. Bayan Ko. She paused, drawn to it like gravity. Where'd you learn that? She asked. My nane used to sing it, the medic said without looking up. Said it was a song for broken countries. I figured it fits. Later, at the edge of the city, Amara met with a group of coalition commanders. They were skeptical, still clinging to rigid doctrine and simulation-based tactics. One questioned her methods outright. You're glorifying the past. Nostalgia doesn't win wars. No, Amara replied calmly, but it reminds us why we fight. That's more dangerous than any weapon you've built. That night, under the shelter of shattered satellites and aurora-shrouded skies, the resistance launched an unorthodox strike on the Zorothi forward base. It wasn't an assault in the traditional sense. Dozens of signal drones dropped propaganda leaflets, replicas of 19th-century Filipino freedom manifestos, over the enemy encampment. Below them, sonic pulses mimicked the rhythm of native war drums, embedded with coded commands meant to overwhelm Zorothi auditory processors. As their comms collapsed under the weight of unfamiliar cultural data, Amara initiated the ground assault. The battle lasted only minutes. The Zorothi withdrew not because they were defeated, but because they were unsure what had just occurred. Their system of total control, based on analysis and predictability, was cracking. Amara stood amid the wreckage, her boots caked in ash and frost, her gaze turned skyward. A star blinked, then another. Novak approached. They're calling it the Bayani Doctrine now, he said. The high brass. They're running tests on it. They'll try to simplify it, she said. Package it into a weapon. You don't want that? I want them to remember it's not just strategy. It's survival, and survival is messy. In the distance, a young recruit lit a makeshift candle beside a ruined monument. A small gesture, unnecessary, yet somehow it made everything feel real. Amara watched the flame flicker. For the first time in years, she felt something stronger than duty, something older. She turned to Novak. Tell command we're ready for the next phase. He raised an eyebrow. Even without reinforcements? She smiled. We've got more than enough ghosts. Smoke curled through the corridors of the orbital relay station as alarms pulsed in steady rhythm. Less an emergency warning now, more like a heartbeat for the dying. Commander Amara Reyes stepped over a fallen bulkhead, flanked by 2 resistance scouts, the soles of her boots slick with oil and ash. They had only hours before the Zerothi returned in full force. The first wave had been disoriented, not defeated. Time was running out. The station's AI core was buried beneath tons of twisted alloy, once a proud coalition structure, now a tomb. They needed to reach it, not for evacuation, not for surrender, but to upload what remained of the Bayani Protocol, the last synthesis of culture as warfare strategies ever devised. Not a weapon, a map of how to remain human under impossible odds. We're close, Novak said, panting, his face streaked with soot. Pressure's stable for another 20 minutes. Amara nodded, pulse calm despite the chaos. That's enough. They found the core chamber barely intact. A fractured terminal flickered dimly, like it too was unsure whether to keep going. Amara moved toward it while the others stood watch, weapons raised, but knowing that if the Zerothi breached the outer shell, defense would be meaningless. She placed a data crystal onto the terminal and keyed in her access code. The screen hesitated, then responded with a familiar trill. Initiating Bayani Protocol uplink. Estimated time, 7 minutes. 7 minutes, Novak muttered. They'll be on us in 5. Then we slow them down, Amara replied without hesitation. She began uploading the files. Historical battle strategies encoded with semantic viruses, cultural fragments designed to mislead Dominion predictive AI. The pattern was chaotic but intentional, the cadence of Tagalog poetry repurposed as cryptographic interference, the structure of folk epics reimagined as encryption layers. The Zerothi would never understand it. That was the point. They couldn't suppress what they couldn't translate. Suddenly, a tremor rocked the station. The lights dimmed. Static hissed in their comms. They're here, one of the scouts said grimly. Outer corridor breach. Novak moved toward the blast door, prepping charges. We hold here. Amara barely glanced away from the terminal. Number you hold there. I finish this. Novak didn't argue. They had crossed the line where disagreement was a waste of oxygen. Explosions echoed through. The station, close enough now to feel the shockwaves in the steel. Amara focused on the data stream, watching as centuries of forgotten resistance were reborn in code. In this moment, her ancestors were not stories. They were living strategy. Outside the chamber, the firefight began. Flashes of plasma lit the hallway. Screams. Silence. Then more fire. Upload at 62%. The console spat sparks. Amara shielded her face but didn't move. Come on, she whispered. The door burst inward, smoke rolling through the breach. A Zerothi drone entered first, 6 limbs, a body like liquid metal shaped in mockery of bone, its targeting array locked onto her, unblinking. Before it fired, a hand reached from the smoke, Novak's, and slammed an arc baton into its sensory array. The drone spasmed and collapsed, twitching. Still with you? Novak grunted, staggering in with blood trailing down one arm. Not letting you finish the song alone. She didn't thank him. There wasn't time. Upload at 91%. Another figure entered the room, tall, unmistakably Zerothi. Not a drone, a tactician class. Its segmented skull glistened with neural mesh. It paused, analyzing the data stream, the scent of human adrenaline, the blood patterns on the walls. Your tactics are irrational, it said in a voice like broken strings. They degrade cohesion, undermine statistical integrity. Amara stepped forward, calm. They aren't tactics. They're stories. Stories are inefficient. No, she said. They're unkillable. The Zerothai raised an arm to strike, but Novak hurled himself forward, dragging it back as both tumbled through a collapsing floor panel, vanishing into smoke and silence. Upload complete. The screen dimmed, transmission dispersed. Amara stood alone now, the room heavy with grief and triumph. She walked to the relay controls and triggered the final command. Across the sector, thousands of dormant coalition satellites awoke, each one beaming fragments of the Bayani protocol into every ship, every base, every surviving human outpost. The signal would travel fast, faster than any rescue craft or fleet ever could, and wherever it reached, it would carry the blueprint for something the Zarathi couldn't consume: defiance. From orbit, the Banag received the pulse. The AI hummed low as the new data synchronized. Amara's voice came through the link, faint but steady. "It's done!" On a far-off mining moon, a child read a line of text from a cracked tablet. "Ang hindi marunong lumingon sa pinanggalingan ay hindi makararating sa paroroonan." The words meant little to her yet, but the way her mother's eyes shimmered when she translated them, that meant everything. Somewhere in deep space, a Zerothai analysis unit parsed the transmission and failed. Again and again. It looped the sentence until its predictive logic faltered. It flagged the phrase as hostile, but couldn't explain why. Amara sat in the silence of the relay chamber, surrounded by the past, breathing in the present. Behind her, smoke still curled toward the broken ceiling, a reminder of cost. But in her chest, something beat stronger than protocol. It was not victory. It was the knowledge that the fight was no longer hers alone.